Here we go.
Yeah, I'm gonna do another trend to the No, otherwise just like
Shut off. We can talk about this later. It's not important right now. What's important is this first toss of the turn left to all of you. 1. This sword that a man holds on the left of this canvas is mostly obscured by red blotch due to the damage when transporting this painting to the League of Nations headquarters for safekeeping. Blood gushes from the stab in the right foreleg of a horse in this painting. On top of that horse is a man in garish red pants who's bent over backwards in pain. A man leaning away from the viewer with a green jacket may be the same figure making a cross-like gesture in a chronologically later work. At the center of this painting is a mustachioed man holding a knife and wearing a white turban. This painting depicts a reaction to an uprising at the Puerta del Sol against French troops commanded by Joaquin Murat. For 10 points in this Francisco Goya painting.
Execution of Emperor.
That's incorrect. It depicts a charge of the Mamelukes.
second minute.
That's right. Chronologically later.
Mr. French, I was like, oh, weird.
We last see this character riding away on a black ship along with the mysterious Queen of Northgates and of the Wastelands. For example, he's named this lover of Sir Accolon of Gaul and mother of Mordred.
Mordred.
What do you got? Yes. In the story included in L'Amour d'Arthur, the opposite of hilarity ensues at a tournament after Morgan beguiles this knight into using a magical golden shield with a pictographic message reading something like, "Hey Arthur, everyone knows Lancelot is boning Guinevere."
I like that.
He's a knight.
Okay.
No, it's Sir Tristan. Sir Tristan earlier had off this ruffian who was shaking down Tristan's liege, King Mark of Cornwall. In some versions of the story, this champion of Ireland is a knight of the Round Table and the uncle of Isolde.
He's done.
No, it's Morholt. You have received 10 points. Next topic. This poem compares a woman's voice to the voice of the stars have when they sing together. After that woman sees time like a pulse shake fierce through all the worlds. One character in this poem imagines lying in the shadow of the living mystic tree before meeting Cecily, Gertrude, Magdalene, Margaret, and Rosalise, the 5 handmaidens of the Lady Mary. In this poem's final stanza, the central character lays her face between her hands and weeps, causing the speaker in parentheses to respond, "I heard her tears." Its main character stands on the rampart of God's house and holds 3 lilies in her hand and thinks of reuniting her with her lover in the afterlife. This poem is named for a woman who leaned out from the gold one.
What's a damsel?
That's right.
Good.
Name these procedures whereby a given matrix can be rewritten as a product of other matrices with useful properties. For example, the sure form has zeros below its main diagonal. Okay. That's it. That's the question.
The form with the zeros below diagonal.
Decomposition.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Triangular.
Sorry, let me start that again. I fucked up. One of these applying to complex value objects is named for sure and gives the desired result as the so-called sure form under the adjoint by a unitary operator. Templates each first means procedures whereby a given matrix can be rewritten as a product of other matrices with useful properties. For example, the sure form has zeros below its main diagonal.
Decomposition.
Yes, the QR decomposition writes any matrix of the product in an orthogonal Q and a matrix R with this property, which the sure form also has. It's particularly easy to write the determinant for a square matrix with this property.
Upper
Triangular, yeah, upper triangular.
Upper triangular.
Given a matrix M and 2 vectors U and V, these are scalars sigma such that MV equals sigma U and M star U equals sigma V. Finding these allows you to decompose M into the matrix of vectors U times a matrix with these values on the diagonal times the conjugate of the matrix of vectors V. These are called singular values.
Oh, singular value decomposition.
Yeah. So you receive 20 points. Can you ask me to keep it down out there?
Guys, please keep it down.
Toss of 3. For a weakly coupled ensemble, this quantity contains an interaction term proportional to the logarithm of the quantity that can be written as a series via the technique of Mayer cluster expansion. Mayer cluster expansion. That second quantity is known as the configurational integral, and it's the constant of proportionality between 1 and 2 particle partition functions. So this quantity itself is given by minus kinetic temperature times the log of the partition function. This variable is the natural potential of the temperature, volume, and particle number basis. It is the Legendre transform of the internal energy with respect to entropy. It represents the amount of useful work that can be obtained from a closed system by reducing it to the standard state. For 10 points in this quantity given macroscopically by internal energy minus For 10 points each, I'm still talking about American war poetry. This Georgian wrote about a pilot remembering a World War II air raid on Japan in his poem Buck Dancer's Choice. He read his poem The Streets of Fields at Jimmy Carter's inauguration, but may be better known for his novel Deliverance.
Deliverance is Dickie. Yeah.
This author of the collection, The Avenue Bearing the Initial of Christ into the New World, attacked the Vietnam War in his long poem, The Book of Nightmares. His short poems include After Making Love to Your Footsteps and St. Francis in the South. What do you got? It's Galway Kinnell. This long poem by Ezra Pound laments that millions died in World War I for an old bitch gone in the teeth for botched civilization. It declares that the age demanded an image of its accelerated grimace and focuses on an author who strove to resuscitate the dead art of poetry.
It's Hugh Sullivan Moberly.
That's 20 points. Here's your toss of four. After betraying this ruler, General Fan Wuji committed suicide so that his severed head could be used in an assassination attempt. This ruler forced one rival to execute his own son, Crown Prince Dan. One attempt to overthrow this ruler involved the fake eunuch Lao Ai, who revealed himself when he drunkenly boasted of being this ruler's stepfather and was orchestrated by the Chancellor Lu Buwei. This ruler sided with the young Li Xin against the older Wang Jian during a dispute about the size of the military, endorsing a smaller 200,000-man army that was embarrassingly defeated. Attempted assassins of this ruler included Gao Jianli, a blind lute player, and Jin Ke, who threw a dagger and missed. This man consolidated his power by defeating the state of Chu and was assisted by the Chancellor Li Shi, who promoted various scholars.
So, Woody.
Say that again?
Woody.
No. And promoted varying scholars and burning books. For 10 points, named this legalist, he unified China as the first emperor of the Qin dynasty.
Chinjuangdi.
Say again?
Chinjuangdi.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Chin Chin.
Wandi? No.
It's Qin Shi Huang or
Yeah.
Shi Huang Di. Like any of those seem to be an acceptable answer.
Sorry, I don't know the proper way to say it.
Here's your bonus. During this event, the monk Gregory of Huntington purchased a collection of holy texts so that he could translate them, saving them from certain destructions for 10 points each. In this 1290 event, were a certain group associated with the death of St. William of Norwich was told to leave cities such as York and London.
Like the expulsion of the Jews, I think, probably. The expulsion of the Jews from England.
Yeah. The Jews were expelled from England by this ruler, who also did some invading in Scotland and Wales.
I always forget.
What do you got?
Edward
From
the First.
Edward I issued this law which banned sub-infeudation. It led to the end of feudalism in England and is considered a landmark moment in property law.
Yes, heard of it before, but I don't remember what it's called. I don't remember.
Impress me.
I don't remember.
I am not impressed. Quia and Torres.
Okay.
Toss of 5. In this book's 8th chapter, the author considers workers' movements in Europe and warns of a cheap and dangerous socialism that results from excess pondering. That chapter, which begins with a quote from The Beast by William Vaughn Moody, compares the ownership of land to Jason attaining the Golden Fleece. Its author laments the death of his infant son, only to realize that his death prevented him from growing up choked and deformed within the veil. In its chapter of the passing of the firstborn, this book begins by discussing the unspoken question: how does it feel to be a problem? It describes the history of the Freedmen's Bureau in its 2nd chapter, which declares that the problem of the 20th century.
Souls of Blackfoot.
That's it. Members of this religion reject the existence of physical reality, arguing that only the mind exists. For 10 points each, this Christian denomination founded in the late 19th century, which argues that the Bible is allegorical, and those certain works include a list of the true meaning of common words found in the Old and New Testament. Who's written work?
Christian Science. I'm just
Sure.
guessing. Christian Science.
Yeah. That so-called key to the scriptures, along with science and health, are a major section of an 1875 book by this woman, the founder of Christian Science.
Very good. Your head.
Christian scientists believe that the mind can be used to harm others, a practice they call by this name, which they borrowed from mesmerism. The so-called Second Civil War trials of 1878 came about when an early Christian scientist accused a rival of this practice.
I don't know.
What do you got for me?
Hypnotism.
Animal magnetism.
Oh, that's totally from mesmerism.
Yes, so it is. You get 20 points. Oh, toss of 6. This person was first elected to Congress to replace Scott Klug. While serving in the U.S. House of Representatives, this politician repeatedly introduced the Health Security for All Americans Act, which would have established a single-payer system. This politician also authored the amendment to the Affordable Care Act that let children stay on their parents' health insurance until age 26. In the 2012 Senate election, this Democrat defeated Libertarian Joseph Ketzel, as well as former Secretary of Health and Human Services and governor of her home state, to replace Herb Kohl, despite concerns that this native of Madison was too liberal for
Baldwin.
That's right. For 10 points each, name these composers of choral music. In 2012, this contemporary American composer premiered the most recent of his virtual choirs, Water Night, following in the footsteps of his earlier pieces, Lux Arumque and Sleep.
I have no idea. Class. I'm just sure. class.
It's Eric Whitaker. This composer set Middle English poems such as Wolcom Yole, or Yole, in his choral work, A Ceremony of Carols. He also composed the cantata Rejoice in the Lamb and the song cycle Serenade for tenor horn and strings.
This is another American?
Yeah.
I got nothing.
Benjamin Britten. This composer's choral works include his Coronation Masses and finished requiems included by Francis Meyer.
Sorry.
Toss up 7. In Richard Brodigan's novel, In Watermelon Sugar, these animals help the narrator with his arithmetic after killing his parents. Sam Selbon wrote 2 novels about a character nicknamed for this animal and his wife Urmila, including A Brighter Sun. These animals are called bright topaz denizens of a world green, who pace in sleek chivalric certainty in a poem describing how they prance upon a screen. That poem by Adrienne Rich describes how they are tigers. That's right.
This one there called the short poems I was telling you about.
Yeah.
Feel it.
That's why I remember.
Your bonus. This man's second number is the inverse square of the alpha number. For 10 points each, named this astronomer who proved that dynamo action cannot maintain an axisymmetric magnetic field.
Shit, I used to know this. I never did.
And now you don't. It's not sad. It's Thomas Cowling. The first Cowling number is a ratio of the electromagnetic force to this type of force. Its ratio to viscous forces is the Reynolds number.
Inertial.
Yeah, the Cowling approximation in linear pulsation theory consists of ignoring perturbations in this quantity. Poisson's equation for it states that its Laplacian is 4 pi times the gravitational constant times the mass density.
So, potential, I don't know what I'm saying.
What do you got?
Potential energy.
No, it's just the potential.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
Plus B. This molecule forms part of the compounds known as Josephus ligands, which are chiral diphenylphosphines, first prepared accidentally in an attempt at synthesis of fulvalene. Its existence spurred the creation of hapticity.
So, ferrocene.
It's the one. Your bonus. Nikolai Gogolubov's essay, The Realm of Darkness, praises this author for exposing the unthinking tyranny of Russian provincial life. For 10 points each. Named this 19th century Russian playwright who wrote about Katerina, a woman who commits suicide after domestic tyrants prevented her from pursuing a relationship with Boris in his play, The Storm. What have you got for me?
Block.
It's Alexander Ostrovsky. Ostrovsky's emphasis on dramatic realism helped inspire this Russian director's quest for psychological realism on stage. He founded the Moscow Art Theater and developed exercises to help actors access the emotional lives of their character, which begins known as his system.
Stanislavski.
This play by Anton Chekhov was the first landmark production of Stanislavski's Moscow Art Theater. It ends with the budding playwright Treplev shooting himself after learning that Nina still alive with the older writer Trigor.
Siegel.
9. Early in this war, the aggressors won the battle over Gemay. The one participant in this war appointed the Frenchman Pontus de la Gardie as its commander-in-chief. Duke Magnus of Holstein became a puppet king during this war, but lost his territory at the Battle of Venden. One country experienced success in this war after reforming its heavy cavalry into units called Husaria, which would develop into the famous winged hussars. This war led to the creation of the Duchy of Kurland. This war was ended by the treaties of Plusa and Jamza-Polski, signed after the cities of Narva and Pskov were captured by John III of Sweden and Stefan Batory of Poland. What's this?
Livonian War?
Cheryl Mills served as the Chief Defense Counsel during this event. For 10 points each, in this 1998 event, the second of its kind, where a certain Democrat was acquitted of charges of perjury and obstruction of justice and trying to cover up an affair.
Bill Clinton's impeachment.
Yeah. The prosecution in the Clinton impeachment was led by this powerful Illinois Republican, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee. During the trial, it was revealed that this man had an extramarital affair of his own during the 1960s.
Cambridge.
No, it's Henry Hyde.
Oh.
Hyde had previously defended this former naval officer and national security advisor to Ronald Reagan, who was convicted of perjury and obstruction of justice after the Iran-Contra scandal. What do you guys know?
North.
Poindexter.
Pointed.
Sorry.
I always mix that up.
And the Sana'a document, discovered in 1972, is evidence that this process began earlier than previously believed. Zayd ibn Tabib.
So, like, the compilation of the Quran. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit obvious. Here's your bonus. Consonants articulated at this part of the mouth include the semi-vowel sound, usually written in English as Y, and the infamous Hungarian consonant stops TY and GY for 10 points each. Name this bony plate at the roof of the mouth, which is a common birth defect that can be cleft.
Palate.
The tip of the tongue also touches the hard palate when this kind of consonant is produced. Making one of these consonants requires curling the tongue back, and they are common in Indian languages, having possibly been borrowed into Sanskrit from Dravidian substratum.
So reflexive, right? Reflexive consonants, reflexive.
These are called retroflex
Oh,
consonants.
fuck, yeah, that's right.
This term is used to describe consonants that are articulated in the same place, such as T and N, which are both alveolar, and K and G, which are both velar.
No. They're like,
Like
sympathetic.
homorganic. You got 10 points. All right, at the half, the score is 145, 95. All right, here's task 11. Peter Maxwell Davies composed 8 songs for a Mad King for an ensemble of instruments commonly named for this work, which inspired the second and third of Stravinsky's 3 Japanese songs. This work includes a passacaglia that describes giant black butterflies which blot out the sun. Its main character imagines smoking tobacco from the trepanned head of Cassander in its movement Gemeinheit, which is introduced in its first movement, Mondestruken. Scored for violin, flute, clarinet, cello, and piano was 1.
Trout.
No.
What?
It was commissioned by Albertine Zeme, who sang the narration during its 1912 premiere. This melodrama consists of 21 movements set to the poems of Albert Giraud, which are performed using Sprechstimme. For 10 points, named this composition about a commedia dell'arte character written by Arnold Schoenberg. It's cool.
Yeah, it's feeling Schoenberg, really. I recognize one of the parts, yeah. But.
Near the end of this ballet's first act, Franz dances a Zardas with Rosika in an effort to make Swanhilda jealous. For 10 points each, name this ballet in which Franz falls in love with a mechanical doll.
Yeah.
Copelia was written by this French composer who included the flower duet in his opera Lakme.
Yeah.
In 1952, he was a British choreographer of, I believe, Ballet Sylvia. He was a principal choreographer of the Royal Ballet from 1933 to 1970 and incorporated traditional English folk dances into his version of La Field Monarde.
Yeah, I don't remember this guy.
Okay, his name is Sir Frederick Ashton. You get 20 points.
I'll remember that.
Toss up 12. At the end of this novel, its main characters are rescued by troops led by Captain Worley. Several characters in this novel open a chest and discover an ivory chess set, allowing them to use rooks carved like elephants as ransom for hostages. Its protagonist repeatedly refuses the offer to marry Sumach, and is briefly saved from torture by the intervention of Hist. This novel begins with its main character and Hurry Harry encountering Winterglass Lake, where they meet the feeble-minded Hetty and her worldly sister Judith aboard the Ark of Thomas Hutter. Mark Twain lampooned this novel's violations of the rules governing literary art in an essay about its author's literary.
Deerslayer?
Good job.
I read that essay.
Could be any one of them.
What was it?
They're all
Deerslayer.
terrible. Okay.
Most of the members of this class have an associated protein such as slingshot that modulate their activity. Points each give the name of this class of enzymes that transfer a phosphate group using an amino acid whose side chain is a phenyl.
So some type of
Tyrosine kinase.
That's right. This tyrosine kinase family, named for having a pair of nearly identical domains, form a signaling pathway with transcription factors known as STATs.
Jack.
Okay. The receptor for this hormone has 2 tyrosine kinase domains in its beta chains. These phosphorylate its intracellular target IRS1. What do you have?
Estrogen.
Insulin.
Insulin.
Right.
Top 13. A value closely related to this one, but accounting for indirect effects, is known as the kerma. The F factor gives the proportionality between the exposure and this parameter. Multiplying this quantity by the appropriate RBE produces another closely related quantity known as the weighted or effective form of this, which gives a better measure of risk. This quantity has the SI unit gray, whereas its effective form, 3.
Cross-section.
No. Whereas its effective form has the SI unit sievert, but the respective CGS units or GRAD or RAM are still used as well, and points in its quantity because the energy per unit mass deposited by radiation.
The dose.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Your bonus. This character declares that in dramatic literature, the artist remains refined out of existence, indifferent, paring his fingernails. For example, teaching this character who calls history a nightmare from which I am trying to awake. At the end of the first novel, he appears and he resolves to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race.
Oh no, that's really famous.
Sure there is. What can you tell me?
Can't think of it.
Nothing, apparently. It's Stephen Dedalus. Stephen Dedalus hallucinates the ghost of his dead mother in Nighttown in this novel, which follows the day and life of Leopold Bloom. This 13th episode in Ulysses takes place at Sandy Mount Strand, where Leopold Bloom masturbates while watching Gary McDowell's exposed legs. It comes between the episodes Cyclops and the Oxide of the Sun.
Nausicaa. Good job.
Can't believe we
Couldn't get it last game, but you've done that.
Next. Toss up. Whew. A namesake grandfather of this man won the Battle of Sentinum versus the Samnites, and this man dedicated a temple of Hanos after he celebrated a triumph over the Ligurians. This man gained his highest office after the death of Gaius Flaminius. To consolidate his power, this man forced Gnaeus Servilius Gabinus to resign as consul, and broke with tradition by riding a horse, which was prohibited for holders of his office. This man passed a law requiring all mourning to be done indoors, and quarreled with Minucius Rufus.
Ladies
Correct. Your bonus is, this religion was adopted by the Kurdish Buyid dynasty and the Idrisid dynasty of North Africa. For 10 points each, name this religion which Ismail I popularized in the Safavid Empire.
Shia Islam.
Nuh-uh. Ismail I took power in Persia with the help of this militant Shia group.
Wait, we already heard this. We have this exact bonus
I
last
haven't
time.
heard this bonus.
We have.
I mean, if we haven't heard it, you
How
must
did you
have.
not hear it?
I don't know.
Well, it might be
What?
one of those.
Packet.
No, like literally last packet, so it
It was
should have been the
exactly
same editor's
the same.
packet.
But you didn't hear any of these other questions, right?
No.
It was all these other
Okay.
questions.
How did they?
Is it?
Yeah, this is the only one. I don't know how they didn't hear it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was this a bonus that was being mistakenly read to you because of the situation that happened in your room?
No, this is
just
like
game.
this is like in our game against Michigan last time. I don't know.
But I didn't read, okay, so I had the same packet, obviously, and I did not read this bonus last round.
That was weird. Okay, if they haven't heard it, I mean, I trust them when they say like obviously they haven't heard it. But
Okay.
okay,
So I'm not,
yeah,
okay,
okay.
so fortuitous, I guess. Ismail I took power in Persia with the help of this militant Shia group, named for their distinctive colorful headgear. This group's attempt to convert the Turks to Shiism sparked the Battle of Chaldiran, because of love. Yes. Ismail established this Safavid capital of the city in far northwestern Iran, though his successors would move it under Ghazan Khan. The city was also the capital of the Ilkhanate.
It's not Northwestern. I'm not sure what Logic agrees, if any of those sound okay.
It's freeze.
Yeah.
I guess we did on it.
Yeah, we got this one.
Do you remember what position the bonus was in? Was
I mean,
it
I think it was towards the end, so maybe like you have a lot of toss-ups go dead last game or something.
We had 2 toss-ups go dead, I think, so we didn't read.
We had more than that. We had a couple.
Yeah, we had. I mean, it was Yale, Illinois in here, so it was like one toss-up, one dead, 2 toss-ups, one dead. Last round. So
Maybe some weird copying error.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but I didn't read it. So anyway, this is toss-up 15. Here we go. A 1973 paper by Paul Benassaraf argued that a causal account of knowledge presents a problem from Platonistic interpretations of these kinds of truths. A fictionalist account of this concept was formulated by Hartree Field, who also attempted a nominalist account of this concept in response to Quine's naturalistic account. A philosophical approach that held that this concept's core was fundamentally constructive was formulated by Brouwer and was known as intuitionism, a thesis according to which we ought to be ontologically committed to the existence of entities within this field of study became the thesis of this field's indispensability and was formulated by Quine and Tuttle. One.
Math.
That's right,
That is.
Good job, Jerry.
Toss up on the philosophy of math. Here's your bonus. In one episode of this work, a man named Cook Ding carves an ox for his lord so skillfully that the lord learns how to nurture life from that performance for 10 points each. Identify this philosophical work, whose notable inner chapters contain a discourse on making all things equal, which argues that all things may be looked at from 2 points of view.
He dreamed he was a butterfly. What? Zhuangzi?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Zhuangzi is a foundational text of this philosophical school, which is focused on an ambiguous concept called the way. Hui Shi, a common interlocutor in the inner chapters of the Zhuangzi, was a real historical thinker who was a member of this loose school of sophistic thought concerned with a theory of and named after these linguistic concepts.
School of words.
Communicative action.
School of words.
It's the school of names.
Oh, right.
You receive 20 points. Okay, at the 3/4 mark, the score stands at 205, 185.
Yeah.
Here comes toss-up 16. This man included his drawings, railroad station in the form of a wristwatch, and bat spinning at the speed of light in an exhibition of plans that for never-built sculptures called Colossal Monuments. A lattice work called by this artist stands on Madison Street in Chicago and divides the town's baseball allegiance. That sculpture is titled Bat Column. This man's ray gun manufacturing company operated a New York establishment where he painted plaster items like cute pastries and bride mannequin, which were sold to customers. One of his best-known works contains hand grips around a central column and is supported by teeth-like treads. This artist of The Store used black steel to create his clothespin for Philadelphia. 3.
Oldenburg?
10.
Good job.
I was thinking that.
I was not. I was gonna Russian.
One of the figures in this work wears a laurel wreath, while the other has his back to the viewer and wears a black beret. Number to each identify this composition where a woman in a blue dress holds a book and a trumpet.
Music lesson. I have no idea.
Sounds like a Vermeer. I don't know.
Music lesson.
The allegory of the art of painting,
Oh.
the artist in his studio, or a bunch of other things. The allegory of the art of painting is a work by this artist of The Milkmaid and The View of Delft.
It is Vermeer.
This contemporary Vermeer may have been a student of Nicholas Burchard. His genre scenes include card players in an opulent interior. He also painted a Dutch courtyard.
I don't know.
So which
Not
one?
really Dutch courtyards.
Dutch.
What you got?
Chardin.
Dooch.
Oh, okay.
He loved those Dutch courtyards, man.
Yeah.
Fucking painted them all day. Here's your book. Here's Toss of 17. This author wrote a play in which Hedwig is slowly driven insane by auditory hallucinations of crowds cheering Sieg Heil after her husband, Professor Schuster, jumps to death in the title square. One of this author's novels consists of an extended conversation between Otzbacher and Rager, a critic who spends every day staring into Toretto's portrait of a white-bearded man. That novel includes a passage attacking Heidegger as that ridiculous Nazi Philistine in +4s. He also wrote novels about Reutheimer, who kills his sister by building her an isolated house shaped like a perfect cone, and Wertheimer, a pianist who commits suicide because he'll never be as good as Glenn Gould. The uproar of his play Heldenplatz helped inspire a clause in his will which banned publication of his unfinished works in his native Austria. Noted for his narrator's obsessive monologues for 10 points, named its author Old Masters, Correction, and The Loser.
Bernard.
That's right.
Good job, dude.
That is the correct answer. Bonus is for you, just for in this process, seen in solutions in colloids, small crystal particles dissolve, then coalesce to form larger particles. For example, teaching in this process, they can destabilize emulsions and colloids to the growth of large particles or droplets.
Flocculation.
Oswald ripening. This process occurs when colloid particles coalesce out of suspension as seen in flakes in the solvent, in contrast to Oswald ripening, and usually occurs in the suspension of oil particles in an aqueous system.
This is what you just asked us.
Flocculation.
Yeah. Ratios of coagulation of particles can be described by this equation named for an Austrian scientist who also has a diffusion relation with Einstein.
Einstein and Smolkowski, is that the thing? I think that's right.
Molkowski. Good call, dude.
Okay, 235, 205.
Yes.
Is the current.
Three more to go?
Three topics. Well, Voronin bodies are specialized types of this structure.
These are peroxisms.
Good job.
Okay, now we're done.
How about that? That's a thing. For 10 points each, name these Latin American authors. This Chilean author followed her novel Dr. Fortune with sequel narrated by Aurora del Valle, Portrait and Sea Fish, and River Famous Variable in the House of Spirits. I wrote the prologue to this Uruguayan author's history of the exploitation of the New World, Open Veins of Latin America. He also wrote the trilogy Memory of Fire.
Galleon.
This Puerto Rican author included characters like Hamlet, Zarathustra, and Statue of Liberty in her 2011 satire, The United States of Banana. She also wrote one of the first novels in Spanglish, Yo-Yo Boing.
For this person.
I'm giving you 20 points right now. Unless you really impress me.
Alvarez.
It's Janina Braschi. Good enough. 265, 205.
Okay.
Toss up the next one. In the Song of Harbaror, Thor recounts being assailed by bewitched women near this being's home. This figure has the alternate name Claire in a story that describes him as a skilled magician who attends a festival and listens to the tales of Thiassi's abduction of the Doom and the creation of the mead of poetry. In the poetic aid of this deity commissions Thor and Tyr's expedition to obtain the kettle of Hymir, but his servant Fimethane is murdered and his guest insulted by Loki. His one was one.
Aegir.
Good job. Good job, dude.
Your bonus. This conflict was sparked by the death of a king in the Battle of Alcacer Kabir, and the losing side was led by Antonio Prior of Crato for 10 points each in this 1580 to 83 war between two neighboring nations.
So the Spanish Portuguese. We're important.
Yeah.
What do you got?
The Iberian War. Between Spanish and Portugal.
What? You answer me and tell me
Okay.
what your answer is.
The Spanish-Portugal War.
I can accept that.
Okay.
To conquer Portugal, Philip II brought this Iron Duke out of retirement. He's more famous as a cruel governor of the Netherlands.
The Duke of Alva.
Yes, the decisive battle of the War of the Portuguese Succession was this 1582 naval engagement off the Azores, where Spain partially joined Portuguese French Navy. The invasion of the Azores followed.
So, like, It's not, oh yeah, it's not Alcázar here, so there's a
Always start out with something.
Albert Serra.
Ponta Delgada.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This away, read to the last one. This colony rejected an application for citizenship from the Jewish merchant Aaron Lopez. Founders of this colony, such as William Coddington and John Clark, established an early form of democratic government by signing the Portsmouth Compact. In the early years before the American Revolution, this colony was divided into factions